After I bought my house, I cried until I had no tears left. My house is now only worth 540,000 yuan, less than what I still owe the bank. People say buying a home brings happiness and a better life, but after buying mine, I don't feel any happiness at all.
House poor sounds contradictory. Don't you need a lot of money to buy a house? So shouldn't buying a house in China help grow your wealth? Well, yes and no at the same time. Buying property in China is not just considered essential, but the ultimate sign of stability and success. Yet, many homeowners find themselves financially trapped, living from paycheck to paycheck despite owning valuable real estate. So what exactly does house poor entail? It means that after paying your mortgage and home-related expenses, you barely have any money left for daily necessities like food, transportation, health, and leisure. In China, hidden costs unique to the housing market only amplify this problem. For instance, many properties are actually sold unfinished, requiring extensive renovations that can easily double the initial purchase cost. Additionally, maintenance, community management, taxes, all these fees just pile on up, only further draining these people's wallets. In this video, we're going to dig deeper into these following topics: the severity and day-to-day reality of the people who become house poor in China, hidden costs and surprising fees that first-time homeowners don't expect, whether China's deeply ingrained obsession with homeownership needs to be rethought, and finally, the important debate of renting versus buying within the Chinese context. In Asian culture, not listening to your parents is definitely disrespectful and selfish. Trust me, I know a lot about that. Just ask my parents what they think about me doing YouTube. Yet in reality, being financially responsible might actually mean avoiding these crazy housing costs, which would not only protect your futures, but your families. Choosing to rent, save, and spend your money wisely can actually help your parents not have to spend their retirement savings on getting you out of a financial bind. True filial respect isn't about blind obedience. It's about making thoughtful choices that don't burden your loved ones later. You're honoring your parents by taking responsibility for your financial future and theirs. As someone who has personally chose to rent, I'll share my experiences and why I think renting might actually be a better financial decision for many people. In Chinese culture, owning a property isn't just a financial decision. It's a deeply emotional and social milestone. In short, it's heavily romanticized. The phrase 无房不婚 literally means no house, no marriage, and that's definitely persuasive. Look at this example that I found on Reddit. Why are Chinese women so obsessed with housing? My Chinese wife absolutely drove me nuts until we bought our house here in St. Louis, and I don't understand why it was so significant for her. Like, they realize you still have to pay a mortgage, right? You just don't own it outright. And then a comment says, surprised you didn't already have one to marry her. And he raises a good point. Well, if you know anything about Chinese parents, you'll know that they're very adamant about marriage, and sometimes they'll go to lengths to even find a spouse for their son or daughter. But the important thing is, when they're looking for that spouse, they'll ask many questions. And one of the most important ones is, do you own a house? But as you can see in this post, sometimes even though they may want a house, they don't fully understand what that really entails. The saying, no house, no marriage, is deeply flawed. Don't tell anyone I said that. It wrongly merges the emotional choice of a lifelong partner with the cold and calculated decision of a mortgage. And if you ask me, it sounds a little bit like the term gold digger. Marriage should be about companionship, shared goals, and most importantly, emotional connection. Not proving your financial capability by buying overpriced real estate. If anything, it shows that you're financially illiterate. Treating marriage like a property investment sets couples up for financial stress, resentment, and, hot take alert, divorce. Dramas, movies, and advertisements all frequently show that owning a property is the pinnacle of life success. But these portrayals don't really show the reality after you make that major purchase. Desperate to prove themselves, countless people are driven to buy houses at incredibly high prices. They borrow money heavily, not just from banks though, from friends, families, and even peer-to-peer lending platforms. I wonder what the interest rate is on those. As expected, this leads to mounting debts and extreme financial stress, leading to the phenomenon that we call house poor.
People say buying a home brings happiness and a better life, but after buying mine, I don't feel any happiness at all.
In Asian cultures, filial piety is deeply cherished, and fulfilling parental expectations is a sacred duty. But when these expectations become tied to the financial burden of home ownership, filial piety turns into lifelong debt, and not just financial, but emotional as well. Your parents might see the house as stability, success, or with pride, but blindly accepting this responsibility can lock you into a future that's financially draining, robbing you of the chance to build genuine financial independence. Real respect for your parents means caring about your mutual long-term security, not sacrificing your financial future for a symbolic gesture. One of my favorite guilty pleasures is scrolling through luxury real estate listings on Chinese popular apps like Beike and Lianjia. There's something thrilling about imagining myself living an extravagant lifestyle while ignoring the eye-watering prices. Like this stunning multi-million yuan apartment located in Beijing's prestigious Haidian district, known for its top universities and bustling tech hubs. Or a luxurious condo offering breathtaking views overlooking Shanghai's iconic Bund skyline, capturing the city's glamorous lifestyle. And even this million private villa nestled near the exclusive Shenzhen Bay area, promising serene waterfront living and ultimate status. Let's be honest, guys, I would never be able to afford any of these, but let's let a girl imagine. But as I swipe through these listings, some of these houses actually seem affordable. But that's the trick. They show you the monthly mortgage prices, which, if you're paying only the mortgage every month, I mean, maybe it's possible, right? But sometimes the mortgages can be over 50 years long, and you're paying that for every single month. Social media platforms like Douyin and Xiaohongshu, otherwise known as Red Note, show you these luxury interiors with furniture and these social media influencer lifestyles. Yet the truth behind the screen often includes overwhelming debt, stress, and anxiety. Just take me for example. I'm only showing you guys this nice wall, this plant, but if you were to look a little bit closely and over there, you would see a giant mess and that this plant is actually probably dying. Pursuing a lifestyle designed for likes and followers is only a short-term delusion. While the online world praises you for your taste and your wealth, behind that, you're really just privately struggling to even cover the most basic costs, and that can feel really isolating. But why do so many people in China buy houses without really considering the risk? Well, they often simplify their assessment to these two basic questions. Can I afford the initial down payment, and can I afford the monthly mortgage payment? Unfortunately, they overlook crucial factors beyond the immediate expenses. Take my boyfriend as an example. A year ago, he bought an apartment with his mother. Besides the initial down payment and the monthly mortgage that he could just afford, there were a couple other fees that surprised him. $200 a month in ground rent to keep the elevators working, $200 a month to the local city, $150 to maintain everything his tenants break, and to top it all off, the government just changed some laws, so what seemed to used to be a good deal is now just an absolute headache, and I have to deal with it. So what does house poor really mean in China? Let's dive in to the statistics. Firstly, they show that an alarming 21% of urban Chinese households spend more than 30% of their income on their housing, stretching their budgets incredibly thin. In megacities like Beijing and Shanghai, the problem is even more severe. Homeowners there on average spend around 33% of their monthly income on only mortgage payments. In general, you're supposed to spend less than 30% on any expenses related to housing. That includes furniture, any extra fees, taxes, whatever. But they're spending 33% on just the mortgage payments, and that incredibly exceeds the recommended financial guidelines, leaving them financially exposed and vulnerable in the case of an emergency. The consequences of this house poor includes reduced opportunities to save, invest, and plan for your retirement, chronic financial anxiety where you're perpetually trapped in a cycle of living paycheck to paycheck, only so that you can meet your mortgage obligation. And lastly, if an emergency were to occur, like you had to go in the hospital and pay extreme amounts of medical debt, or, I don't know, illness, losing your job, how are you gonna afford that? You might even be forced to sell your home at a loss. Alright, and guys, I found another Reddit post, and trust me, there's millions of these, but let's read it. How do people in China seem to all own several houses? Is it that cheap, or do people borrow a lot of money? I think you might know the answer. I have several Chinese friends who own a few houses and apartments, each in their early 30s. One is a divorced single mother with an okay but not amazing job, and she owns 2 houses in Beijing. How common is this, and is it just real estate that is super cheap, or do people borrow a lot? And this person offers a great example. Some people, my family-in-law, own several flats. It was bought with loans, which are taking 50 to 80% of their net income, forcing them to work on weekends and or beyond retirement age. And they even have to ask for money from others. They have no life outside of work and would be in big trouble if something were to happen. Does that sound familiar, guys? They sound like they're house poor. My parent-in-laws, although on retirement age, took a loan to pay for the flat for my brother-in-law, which he will pay for once he's done with his studies. It was done with zero planning, and it eats 80% to 100% of their income, which brought them into clinical depression and required some help from me and my wife. Well, as you guys can see, owning property is widely seen as financial security. But if maintaining it demands so much of your income, so much so that you're living in constant financial distress, it becomes the opposite of safety. It's actually a danger. A real safety net provides stability, room for emergencies, flexibility for unexpected life events, and a comfortable lifestyle, not chronic anxiety or living from paycheck to paycheck. We've been talking about hidden costs, but what are they specifically in China? Owning a home in China goes far beyond the actual purchase cost. Here are some often overlooked expenses that every potential homeowner should consider. First up, we have 物业费, which is the property management fees. Every month, homeowners need to pay to a property management company. These charges can cover essentials like building maintenance, security services, waste disposals, or common area services like the elevator that my boyfriend mentioned. Depending on the quality and location of the residential complex, these fees can vary significantly from a few hundred yuan to a few thousand. And taxes. We have transaction-related taxes and government fees, obviously. And mind you, these are mandatory taxes and fees, and they can add quite substantial costs to the full purchase price. One, we have 契税, and that's the deed tax, and it can range from 1 to 3% of the original house's price. And then we have 公共维修基金, that's the housing maintenance fund. It's a mandatory contribution that ranges from 2 to 3% of the property's value, and it's used for long-term building repairs and major renovations. Unlike in the US, this is mandatory and it has to go to the government. And hot take, I actually think it's a good thing, because a lot of us in the Western world don't really remember to save up this money and fund, so that when emergencies happen, like, I don't know, an earthquake or the second floor collapses on you, you don't have any money. And lastly, 增值税, which is VAT or value-added tax. This is applied especially in second-hand home purchases and can significantly increase the total price. But besides all of those government fees, there's also renovation and interior costs. This might come as a surprise, but many houses in China are sold as unfinished concrete shells, requiring extensive renovation. Unlike in the Western world, some of these houses in China don't even come with basic flooring, wiring, plumbing, or even lighting. Renovation costs can range from 5 to 10% in smaller cities, but in major cities, it can go from 10 to 20%, or even higher if you're aiming for luxury standards. And then we have the ongoing maintenance costs. Owning properties come with continuous maintenance obligations. Always. Things always break. Expenses for plumbing repairs, heating system maintenance, air conditioning servicing, appliance replacements, and general wear and tear can add up rapidly. Especially if you have a cat like this one scratching the walls. Waza, I'm talking to you. And most people don't know about this, but there's an advantage to renting instead of buying all of these homes. One significant advantage to renting is avoiding all of those costs that I just listed. Typically, your landlords will cover the major repairs, renovations, and property management fees. So instead of having to worry about these hidden costs, for renters, it's quite simple most of the time. You just pay the rent and maybe some other utility fees. But this is a social problem. It goes much deeper than we really think. Many young Asians believe that renting is just throwing money away, habits and pressures. But what's rarely discussed is how home ownership in Asian families often perpetuate financial habits and pressures inherited from previous generations. And they're not always good. These pressures, rooted in historical economic trauma, drive young people to make catastrophic decisions. Choosing to rent isn't wasteful, it's courageous. It breaks the cycle, allowing you to redefine success and invest in your future beyond brick walls and mortgages. We've talked about the hidden costs now, but let's talk about the super duper hidden costs, the hidden ones. Beyond traditional financial expenses, home ownership in China carries culturally influenced costs. For example, lifestyle inflation. When you buy a house, you can't just have it empty inside. You need to make it look nice inside as well so that when you bring your friends and family over, they're like, wow, you're so rich, it's so pretty. So guess what? You spend tons of money furnishing this beautiful house, but as soon as your guests leave, you're sat there eating pot noodles every night.
That's right, we have a whole playroom for the kid. But I'm eating pot noodle for lunch because that's what we can afford.
And not to mention, there's also time and energy costs. As you guys know, time is money and money is time. Home renovations in China often span several months, causing prolonged stress and inconvenience. During this time, you have to negotiate with personal management workers, contractors, supervise workers, and resolve disputes, all while handling these administrative tasks. As a result, not only is your time impacted, but your well-being. And now it's time to hit the nail in the coffin. Many people think that having a house is a financial investment, but really, is it? Housing market vitality, influenced by shifting government policies, can swiftly impact property values. For example, in the UK, a law was just passed so that renters can now rent on a month-to-month basis instead of having to do 12-month contracts. And now that's bringing down the prices of houses because less people are buying houses so that they can rent them out. With the demand being lowered, the prices have also as well. Not so much of an investment anymore, huh? And if you think that you bought a house at $300,000 and expect it to raise up to, $500,000 around the time you retire, you might be in for a trip. Significant appreciation only happens in economically robust cities, like tier 1 cities, such as Beijing or Shanghai. Lower tier cities like small towns have very, very slow appreciation and maybe even none at all. After all, China is huge. There's a lot of space to always build more houses. And what's worse is that families push their children to buy in these lower tier cities because they're more financially affordable. But affordability alone doesn't make it a wise investment, as it might not even go up. It's not uncommon to buy a house in China, wait 10 years, and for it to actually be less than it was when you first bought it. You're not really investing. You're gambling your future financial stability, simply to satisfy outdated parental beliefs. Owning a home anywhere doesn't guarantee you financial success.
I've been out of work for 2 years now. Back in 2011 and 2015, I bought 2 homes, one in my hometown and the other in my wife's. And right after buying, the prices for both properties doubled. After purchasing the second home, I landed a job at a top-tier internet company in Beijing. At that moment, I felt like I had made it. Soon after, our child was born, and to provide a better living environment, we rented a larger place. Our family income was over 500,000 yuan annually, with savings in 2 homes, comfortably middle class. But then in 2022, everything changed. I lost my job. Sure, I received a severance package, the type of deal many dream of, but that moment also ended my career. Soon, it was time for a child to start school, so I decided to buy a home in Beijing to secure enrollment. But that decision drove our family into hardship. Every time I think about how a comfortable life fell apart because one impulsive decision, leaving us barely hanging on with my wife carrying the load, I feel overwhelming guilt.
So here's an alternative approach. Renting in high-cost cities And investing saved money into diversified financial assets, such as stocks, index funds, or businesses could yield way better returns. Into something like the S&P 500 can easily outperform the slow appreciation of a house somewhere in the middle of nowhere. Rental yields remain exceptionally low in top-tier Chinese cities, often 1 to 2% annually, making homeownership equivalent to paying 80 plus years worth of rent up front. And who knows, you might not even live that long. And how do you know when you should rent and when you should buy? Here's a little breakdown. When buying makes sense, you should have a stable career with no imminent relocation plans. Your mortgage and property expenses should only constitute around 30% of your monthly income, and you should have sufficient savings for at least 6 months in case of emergency. And only buy a house for long-term appreciation, so make sure it's in one of those higher-tier cities. But buying might not be a deal in some situations. Like, for example, you shouldn't buy a house if you have to finance heavily through loans from your friends or family. Or if you have an uncertain job and maybe you might have to move soon. And definitely avoid those overheated housing markets, especially in Tier 3 or Tier 4 cities. In these cases, renting might make a bit more sense if you have a flexible job or lifestyle choices. And if you have a desire to put your saved money into diversified assets instead of lumping them all into one property, renting might be for you. And that way you can avoid unpredictable maintenance and renovation costs. Asian society overwhelmingly equates homeownership with self-worth, measuring your life success by the size and location of your home. But your true worth isn't determined by the property that you own. It's defined by the strength to break away from these traditions that keep you financially and emotionally repressed. Standing against cultural pressures doesn't diminish your value. Come on, guys. It shows courage, wisdom, and maturity. Choosing financial well-being and personal happiness over societal expectations. It's the ultimate sign of strength and self-respect. You can think for yourself, trust me. If you guys have any thoughts or opinions, leave them down below and make sure to subscribe so that we can continue this conversation in the next video.